Everyone Needs a Little Hero. Chapter 6. Hooks and Hands. The next week was relatively uneventful, as Hero made his way down the stairs and checked on his newest friend, while maintaining his visits with Maggie and Sam. He stopped in and learned from Maggie that she was going to see someone special to help her speak. Hero liked the way the little girl conversed, and let her know at every chance that he thought she was sweet and kind. This comment always put a smile on her face, and Hero cherished that bashful little grin. As much as he cherished Maggie's smile, Hero hadn't been by to see Sam in a few days. The human boy was out of bed last time he checked, but that was a few days ago. He made up his mind. Hero stretched as big as he could underneath his blankets and stared up at the floorboards that constructed his ceiling and switched on his little side light, which was in the corner of the room. The Christmas lights clicked on with its familiar glow, casting a shine onto Hero's various borrowings and equipment which hung neatly on the wall. He rolled under the covers to stare at the hooks and lines. It had been a while since he had inspected his things, but that would take up a lot of time after his chores, and he wanted to make sure Sam was doing okay. "It'll be fine. I didn't see anything wrong with the lines these past few times. One more day can't hurt. Tomorrow I'll rig all new line and sharpen my hooks. First things first. Chores." Hero pushed himself out of his bed, slipped on his home shoes, and went out to breakfast with his family. His parents had heard of some interesting habits from one of the residents and decided to go check it out. Atlas was going to see the two new girls who moved in, while Callie and Tyron planned to take stock of everything they had in their supply room. Some of the items were there for who knew how long, and it needed to be cleared out. Hero's chores consisted of wiping down their counters, table, and the two spills on the floor from breakfast. He cleared out the water bins, refilled them, and put them back in their place before retreating to his room. Now it was time to go. Hero retrieved his bag, hook, lines, and his pen. For fun, he elected to bring his homemade rubber band slingshot to show Sam, hoping the human would be impressed with his ingenuity. All of his essentials in tow, Hero slipped out into the walls and started his journey through the rafters. The borrower had to admit that there was a bit of excitement going to see the human boy. There were other borrowers about his age, but many of them were still learning how to go out on their own for the first time, or had parents who were still unsure of the humans in the apartments. Those things compiled with the fact that Hero was fascinated and not as terrified of the humans as the others, left for a lot of conversation gaps with the others his age. Somehow, that didn't happen when he was talking with Sam, or even Maggie, for that matter, even though she was young. Was it their differences that kept them engaged? Or was it because Hero wasn't supposed to talk to humans, and that was nerve-wracking and exciting? Whatever the case, Hero was nearly there. The young borrower balanced between the beams and climbed along the wires over the gaps in the wall joists until he reached his familiar place above the bookshelf by the trim on the ceiling. Hero waited by the edge and listened for movement in the room. He wanted to at least keep up good practices as a borrower, even if he had been seen and wasn't as scared as the others. The sounds of some game Sam was most likely playing were muffled through the wooden trim, and there were no sounds of adult footsteps. All good signs. Hero pressed his hand against the wooden slat and peered through it, ensuring the entrance to the walls wasn't completely compromised. All clear. The little aspiring hero opened the wooden panel and slipped out onto the top of the bookshelf before closing the doorway behind him. Crouching low, he crept to the side to look down into the room. Sure enough, there was Sam, nestled on his bed playing his game. The human boy looked a lot better than when Hero came and visited him before. With no other humans around, Hero stood up and gave a wave to grab Sam's attention. The motion caught Sam's eye after a minute or so, and instantly a smile spread across the boy's face. He turned off his game with a quick flick of his finger and sat up straighter on the bed, eyes on Hero the whole time. "Hey, Hero! I was wondering when you were going to come back," said Sam, keeping his voice a little lower, most likely to keep his parents from hearing him talk to a miniature person. His tone suggested Sam was already excited to see the small hero. The borrower boy smiled in kind and began unlatching his grappling hook from his belt. "Hello, Sam. Sorry I've been away for so long," replied Hero, feeling his cheeks getting a little warm with embarrassment. He didn't mean to stay away for so long. "I've been busy, but I'm here now and can stay for a little bit longer if you want to hang out." "Yeah, dude. What do you want to do?" asked Sam, slowly but surely inching closer to the middle of the bed where he sat when he and Hero first met. Well, I don't really care what we do. I did bring something I wanted to show you, if you want," replied Hero, dropping the string over the edge, securing the hook in the wood of the bookshelf. "Sure," said Sam excitedly before giving Hero a curious look. "You need help, little dude?" Hero glanced down and then back at Sam. The little borrower had to admit it was a long way down, and it tired him out if he had to climb it too many times in one day. However, the alternative still made him the slightest bit uneasy. Even though he trusted Sam, and even though the human was true to his word about not telling anyone, the thought of stepping onto the boy's hands gripped his insides in an instinctual hesitation. Sam was gentle, sure, but Hero still felt more comfortable climbing, at least for now. "That's okay. I've got it. Besides, it's good for me." With that, Hero began descending the line, securing his footing and gripping the line tight in his hands. Step after step, hand over hand, Hero slowly made his way down the line. He was just above halfway when he noticed something that must have happened recently. His heart began to pound harder in his chest. His hand suddenly felt clammy. In a fraction of a second, Hero noticed something too late. There was a fray in the line, and it was unraveling fast. The thread continued twisting by his hands under his weight. Hero couldn't climb the distance fast enough to get above the line, and he couldn't make it to the ground at this rate, but he had to try. Hero, knowing the rope burn would hurt, began to slide down the line. He wasn't fast enough. In that breathless moment, Hero glanced up in time as the line finished unraveling. The borrower's heart stopped. A scream constricted in his throat as the air from his lungs was left behind. His rapid descent down the line already put him in a free fall, and now he was plummeting toward the ledge and the bed below him. Hero closed his eyes and braced himself for impact. He wished he could remember his brother's advice when falling far distances, but his mind was drawing a blank. He was going to hit hard, and nothing was going to stop it. There were several breathless seconds while he fell. The impact was sudden and knocked the wind right out from his lungs. He gasped and naturally curled in on himself and wrapped his arms around his head as it made contact, expecting a sharp pain in his back or legs. Somewhere. Anywhere. There was nothing. In fact, Hero could have sworn there was a give to the impact, which was much sooner than Hero expected, and softer than he expected. Hero opened his eyes, expecting to see the bedspread surrounding him, and instead felt his body give an involuntary shudder. Just above his head were 2 thumbs, nearly the length of his whole body. There were 8 fingers in the process of curling up and cupping him at his feet. Hero was suddenly acutely aware of his own pulse and the pulse of the hands he was in. Sam had caught Hero, broken his fall, saved him. The only thing that dampened the moment was now he was in a human's hands and, regardless of how much he trusted that human, it was his first time. Hero tilted his head back as far as he could to catch an upside-down view of Sam's face while the borrower laid on his back, which had a look of sheer panic and awe at the same time as he held Hero. The borrower spun around, propping himself up primarily onto Sam's right hand as his head swirled with everything that just transpired. The small humanoid's mind was reeling and making his vision dizzy. It was Sam's words that let him hang on and pulled him back. "You okay?" asked Sam quietly. Hiro could feel the boy's hands trembling now, and a thought occurred to the borrower. "He's just as nervous as I am in all of this. He's scared, just like me. I can't let him be scared. Heroes need to reassure. They can't be afraid. I can't be afraid." Hiro took a few calming breaths, trying to ignore the way it shook in his chest, and let a nervous smile spread over his face. He leaned back, so he was now kneeling on his knees, sitting up as straight as he could. "Yeah, I'm okay," he replied slowly, still fighting against every swirling thought in his brain from the miniature bouts of nausea fluttering below his diaphragm. "Thank you for catching me. Well, are you okay?" Sam, obviously still trying to remain calm and not aggravate his breathing, barely gave a nod in response. The human boy gave an anxious cough to clear his throat. "Yeah, great. Never better. You're so..." Sam's thoughts fell short as his fingers curled in on the little borrower, his thumb bending to brush Hiro's left arm. Every hair on Hiro's body stood on end as the appendage made contact. He hoped that his heart would stop pounding so hard, but when Sam's thumb brushed against his shoulder, the borrower couldn't help but think how gentle Sam was being with him. For nearly 30 seconds, Sam held Hiro aloft, inspecting him with the natural curiosity humans possessed for borrowers that Hiro had heard so much about. Hiro was finally starting to calm down his breathing, and the blood rushing in his ears finally stopped roaring while he continued to watch Sam's eyes. The borrower boy was about to ask if Sam could put him down when they both heard a noise, a nerve-jolting noise. Sam's mother had just come into Sam's room. Though Hiro couldn't see her, he could hear her as she entered the room and began speaking to Sam. Sam's hands jolted under the young, aspiring Hiro, who barely stifled a yelp at the jolt he received. There was a moment, a single moment, where human and borrower made eye contact and instantly knew what the other was thinking. Hiro couldn't be seen. He asked not to be seen. Sam knew this. But there wasn't enough time to put him back on top of the bookshelf without his mom seeing. Sam, in a split second, made his decision, the only one he really could make. Without warning the borrower in his hands, he dropped his arms down by his side, cupped the small person, and shoved his hands into his hoodie pocket. Hiro suddenly felt the hand jolt beneath him as Sam suddenly dropped his hands down by his side. For a moment he hoped Sam would set him onto the bed, but the borrower had no such luck. The fingers closed slightly around him as the hand he was suddenly on was thrust into thick cotton fabric on all sides. Hiro was suddenly thrust into darkness and warmth, two things that he was usually comfortable with, but, given the circumstances, set his entire body shivering with nervousness. He instinctually curled up in the human's hand, hoping he couldn't be seen with the protection of Sam's hand. From under the fabric, he could hear the muffled voices of Sam's mother and the human that held him. "Sammy, sweetie, lunch is ready," she said, reminding Hiro of how his own mother called him. "Okay, Mom, I'll be there in a second," said Sam. "A break. Sam can put me on the bookshelf and..." "No, sir," said Sam's mother. "It's ready now. You can save your game and get back to it later. Come on." Hiro's heart sank as he heard Sam agree, stand with the utmost care to not jostle the small human he was carrying with him, and head out through the door past his mother. "Hands out of your pockets, please, and don't forget to wash your hands." Hiro felt Sam's hand instinctually wrap a little tighter around his frame before the massive hand rotated, nestling him into the fabric. The borrower boy laid as still as possible as he was jostled in Sam's pocket step after step. There was the sound of running water before more steps to the kitchen where Hiro dared to readjust and sit up so he wasn't smothered by the fabric. He looked up at the tent around him. It was like the old forts he used to make seemingly not too long ago. Sam and his mother talked for a while as they ate, but Hero wasn't paying much attention to that. Instead, his thoughts were consumed with the notion of being held, handled of all things, and then shoved in a pocket. As terrifying as the entire experience still was, Hero had to admit that Sam had been gentle and careful. Another thought occurred to Hero that he found profound and almost alarming. It almost felt good to be held. It was terrifying and still made his knees weak and his head spin. It also was comforting, like a hug from one of his parents or his siblings, granted on a much larger scale, but Hero couldn't help but think it in the back of his spiraling mind. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a massive jostling from Sam getting up from the table and walking to the counter. Hero curled to better disguise himself in Sam's pocket and waited patiently until Sam made his way back into his room. The sound of the door closing was a good thing for Hero, as Sam cautiously pulled the side of his pocket open. "Hey, you okay?" asked Sam, holding unbelievably still. Hero nodded, mentally chuckling to himself as he realized Sam couldn't see him nod, before stabilizing himself with fistfuls of fabric as he made his way to the entrance of the pocket. "I'm fine. I'm okay," called Hero. "Could you put me on the bookshelf, please?" The borrower could only barely see Sam's nervous smile as the human boy held out a hand in front of Hero, a clear invitation to climb on. The little boy only had to brace himself for a moment as his mind and body surged with adrenaline before stepping onto Sam's hand. He crouched to stabilize himself. Sam sheepishly reached up and scratched his neck, avoiding eye contact with the minuscule person in his other hand as he raised his arm up slightly. "Hey, I'm sorry for—" "It's okay," replied Hero, with the most comforting smile he could offer his human counterpart. "I really should be thanking you. I mean, you saved me from falling, and you kept me from being seen. You kept my secret." The brightest of smiles spread across Sam's face as he looked at Hero. "It's all good. That's what friends do, right?" asked Sam. The two boys smiled at each other before Hero had to cut it short. He had been gone a long time and needed to get home. Hero asked Sam kindly to put him back on top of the bookshelf, which Sam agreed to, and said their goodbyes. Sam went back to the kitchen to help his mother while Hero ducked back into the safety of the walls. His little legs carried him steadily all the way back home, and the notion of the human world suddenly seemed slightly less terrifying. On his way, he couldn't help but think that he couldn't wait to go back and see his friend.